will happen. All right? So as much as we say that leadership, and last night, Bishop Todd so ably re-quoted the words of John Maxwell, the guru of leadership training, who said that leadership is about influence. I'd like to add to John Maxwell a little spiritual update. Leadership is not just about influence, it's about information that leads to influence. Because people don't care how much you know till they know how much you care. What information do you have that can influence the direction they're trying to go? All right? So if we don't have faith for the harvest, we need seed, which is information that influences their direction. Deuteronomy 28, verse 38, I'll just read this in your hearing. It says, if this is about the sower having seed, thou shalt carry much seed out into the field and shalt gather little in your harvest. Why? Because it's more than just having seed. Psalms 126 and verse 6 says, he that goeth forth reaping, carrying precious seed, shall doubtlessly come again rejoicing. In other words, once you have seed, there will be a time for you to rejoice if you learn how to use the seed. Jeremiah 1 and 7 says, you got to know who I've called you to. So go forth, he says, you must go to everyone I have sent you. And then you have to learn how to say what I've told you. You need a rhema. In other words, you got to know who you've been called to. Every ministry, every church have an assignment. And you got to become acquainted with what is your assignment. All right? Not just acquainted, but understand that John 12 and 24 says there's hindrances. He says, unless a grain of wheat that's in your pocket, seed, falls to the soil, the ground, and dies, saturation, it remains in seed form alone in your pocket, and you'll have a situation. So it doesn't matter how much seed you have if you don't learn how to let the seed fall to the ground, the soil. And metaphorically, that soil is the sheep. Metaphorically, he used an agricultural metaphor that said that soil is the ground. Because man was taken from what? The ground. So he says, unless it falls to the ground and die. What's the die? There's a word that has been buzzing in this church that I'd actually like to give you to use in your church. Is shelf life. In other words, most of my early years of preaching, I preached to inspire folks. I didn't know any better. And so as long as they shouted when I got done, God scored that one, that's a home run. And if they didn't shout, I was in trouble. The problem is it felt good, but the shelf life just ended. When they walked down to church, that was it. Because I preached and taught for inspiration. So now I'm getting a little older, I teach for information and transformation. Because I realize whether they shout or not is not important if they can live victoriously when it's done. Nothing wrong with people who shout. I can hoop the hoopers, but it's got to have some what? Shelf life. It's got to fall to the ground and die if we're going to see the harvest. We've got to have folks talking about our ministries and our churches long after they've left. And so this whole saturation piece, sometimes it doesn't die if there's fictional ideas of church growth or ministry development. What it means is, I'm going to build this ministry the way I saw it built when I was coming up in church. Guess what? The culture has changed. The thinking processes have changed. Sometimes we have fictional ideas about what worked and not what works. I don't want to be where God was. I want to be where God is. Then there, and where he's going, but he has the benefit of getting there before us. Secondly, there is fruitless relationship. The kingdom functions on relationship. So in order for us to be able to be ahead and learn, we have to learn how to build relationship. But it can't be a relationship, Minister Karina, that competes with each other. It has to be a relationship that completes. Y'all pardon me, but I'm sick and tired of church folks that say they have the answers but keep it to themselves. I'm finding church folks who says, if I figured it out, I'm going to keep it because we're going to be the only one doing it over here. The devil is a lie. We have to become more kingdom mindset and stop being church mindset. We've got to learn how to impact the kingdom and create influence across. This city needs to belong to the churches. There's foolish practices. Insanity is doing it the same way and expecting a different result. We have to say if it doesn't work and God has not released it, Kill it till the season comes. Family traditions. We've all, the 7 last words of the church is that we have always done it this way. And sometimes it's just time to do it a different way. That's the 7 last words of the church. And then there's frustration, having toiled to not produce anything. If we're going to have fruit for the harvest, all right, if we're going to have fruit for the harvest, we've got to work on the soil. The soil is not just influence, it's what? Information. It's not just influence, it's information. It's what makes your particular ministry unique. All right? If there's 6 churches on the block, why should anybody go to yours? What's so different about yours? Now I'm going to say something that's a little radical. I'll go see the other 5 and see what they do. Because I certainly don't want to carbon copy anybody else. I want when folks walk into my church, they say, this is different. There's something that has to separate you and create the distinctiveness. Here's what the Bible says: you can have all the seed you want. Every sower knows there's going to be some wayside sowing where fowls come and eat. There's going to be some stony place sowing where you have all earth and no maturity. There's going to be some sowing on thorns where you start being irritable, start producing Absaloms and Korahs. Where there's wolf in sheep clothing, check his seed. However, the Bible also says there's good ground that produces 30, 60, and 100-fold. My suggestion this morning is this: if you don't like the harvest, check where you're sowing the seed. Who you're spending your time with. How you're spending your time. Bottom line is this: are you building a relationship that empowers, or are you building a relationship that devours? I'm out of time. It not only needs seed, you need soil, and you need saturation. Saturation, ladies and gentlemen, is how you're affecting your city, how you're affecting your community, how you're affecting nationally, internationally. All of them are very different strategies, and you've got to know what the strategy God is giving you to work. All right? I think we've got to move beyond just our churches and our neighborhoods. We've got to have a global vision now and strategy to support that. All right? I think the world's moved to global economy, the international economy. The church needs to move to. All right? We've got to learn how to embrace both internally and externally. Internally, our members, but externally, folks who just pass our church. So we've got to influence internally friends, family, church members, ministry leaders, and sanctify the searching and those who just a situation. Uncommitted and unconventional, we've got to embrace it. But we've got to also become familiar with how to embrace the unsaved and the unchurched. Too many churches are good internally, but are terrible externally. All right? And we've got to work on the saturation. The saturation is influence. Can I go into West Philadelphia, you know your church is in Germantown, and what would they say? Jesus even said, saturation is so important. Jesus stopped one day and said this: who do men say that I was son? They say about my confidence. If you don't know that, then you have the deception of what the impression you create, not the impression you create. All right? And people do not come to your church based on just what's going on internally. They come to your church based on what they've heard externally. So what's good, bad, and different, you need to know. All right? Burger King doesn't become successful, if they are, by not knowing what people have to say about what. All right? When people's impression are changing, they change the offering. They start putting some salads in there, so now you have